Helen Yee here in San Diego at Steel MMA and Fitness, being joined by the great, the one and only Mr. Dominick Cruz. Now, first off, I have to say I love the new summer merch, the cruise control tanks that you have out.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you giving the shout because, you know, it's good for the ladies, it's good for the kids, good for everybody, and it's summer, so let's wear the tank tops.
Yes, and what better place to be than San Diego, especially in the summer. But I know all your fans can't wait to see you get back in there. I heard you tell the schmo and maybe some possibilities of names that you would like to see, and one of them maybe a Henry Cejudo.
Yeah, well, I don't really want to talk much about him because he's not even in the testing pool. But I'm going to say if he makes it through the next 6 months of USADA, remember he jumped out of the testing pool, so he had no pressure on him. He wasn't he wasn't building any division. He just took a break, sat on his hands, got fat, got lazy, maybe did whatever he wanted outside of the testing pool. Now he's getting back into the testing pool, which means he wants to get back into a competitive mindset. Think of an Ngannou. Ngannou blew his knee out and he stays in the testing pool and stays putting the pressure on himself to hold the division up. If you leave and you retire, you're relieving yourself of pressure. You're not in a competitive mindset. You don't get to jump right back into the top. You get to jump to the back of the line. So if he does make it through the next 6 months, testing clean, Henry Cejudo, I would love to be the first person that he faces to end up back in the division because he's not at the top anymore. He retired. He's all the way in the back. I don't care what he's done. And, the way that our last fight went, it needs to be a rematch because it wasn't clear.
And speaking of Francis Ngannou, someone you just brought up, it looks like he expressed a lot of interest in a fight against Tyson Fury and said that he won't renegotiate with the UFC unless that Tyson Fury fight is on that contract. So what do you make of that?
Well, I mean, I've heard him do another interview where he said, I want to work with the UFC because there's a bigger scale that goes on. You can have a one Tyson Fury fight and make one chunk of money and then you're done for the rest of your career. Ngannou is a mixed martial artist. He's not a boxer. So you can't leave the UFC contract, go to a WBC contract, fight boxing, and try to come back to the UFC. So that being said, as an athlete, Ngannou's going to learn that you've got to learn to work with the UFC, with the WBC, with the money. Everybody gets to share. We all get to work together. Otherwise, you don't get to be a mixed martial artist. You get to be just a boxer. So he's got to make that decision himself. He's mentioned that himself. He knows. So I think those two will come up with a deal, and it'll merge boxing and mixed martial arts. And in a perfect world, that's ideal for the heavyweight division and for fighting in general. Combat sports, I think it's an amazing thing. But again, I want to touch on how tough Ngannou is to stay champion, to not retire, to not give up the belt, to stay under the fire, under the heat. Remember, when you're behind like this, you've got people chirping at your heels trying to get that belt. So you're hurt and you're waiting for this opportunity, but you don't get to use it. To stay under the fire and to stay in the competition under that amount of pressure while you can't compete is extremely difficult. And Ngannou's under a heavy fire that people don't know about when you're injured with the world title. I did it for 2 years. It's not easy. It's one of the hardest things I ever did. So respect to Ngannou, all the prayers and best wishes to your recovery, and good job staying tough in there and staying champion and building the division. Even though you can't compete, it's not easy to be where you're at. I hold you high.
Yes, and very well said. Now, speaking of that, the top of the heavyweight division, it looks like Dana White is proposing maybe a interim title fight between Jon Jones. Finally, we'll see him move up to heavyweight against Stipe. What do you make of that? And also Jon Jones moving up to heavyweight.
That's another reason why we can't see Ngannou and Tyson Fury right away, what you just said. If Tyson and Fury happens, then that pulls him out of the contracts with Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic. Yeah. So how is the UFC and Ngannou going to work that out? I don't know. But we can't have all these fights you just mentioned unless we just...
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, unless we make a bridge. So I don't know how they're going to do that. The UFC is some of the best matchmakers on earth. WBC knows what they're doing. I have no doubt that Dana White and them and the businesses know what they're doing. So I couldn't answer that question, but I think they'll get it done because it's good for the sport of just fighting in general. Boxing, mixed martial arts, wrestling, Muay Thai, all of it. We all get to come together and work as one, I think, eventually.
Yeah, and there's always so many great fights going on, just like in a couple weeks for that lightweight title, a division that you fought in early on in your career, 155, Charles Oliveira versus Justin Gaethje. Who do you think takes that one?
Oh, man, who's going to win that one is going to be the person who can dictate the forward pressure. If you can get Gaethje on his heels, you got a good case with him. Oliveira does that usually for a round or two, but he's shown that his cardio has improved and been able to last all 5 rounds. Early on in his career, he tended to fade. So if the Oliveira who's been showing up, who doesn't fade, shows up for Gaethje, I think Gaethje's got a hard night because of the range, because of the submission offense. And we've seen that Gaethje can get caught with submissions, as we saw with Nurmagomedov. So somebody with Oliveira's black belt efficiency, his range, his length, and the way that he's fixed his cardio to be a world championship fighter, I think it's a very tough test for Gaethje. But again, it's a tough test for Oliveira, and that's why it's fun to be champion if you're Oliveira, because if there was a test, it's a guy who can hold you down, wrestle you, keep the cardio up, keep you on your heels, take away your range, and just chop your legs. So they are each other's kryptonite. And that's a gift for the fans.
Yeah, definitely. And lastly, a couple weeks ago, we saw Khamzat Chimaev. He fought Gilbert Burns. I'm just curious to get your thoughts on Khamzat's rise so far and where you see his future.
Khamzat's rise is going to be big. I think what's going to make the big difference for Khamzat is from here, with all the fame, with all the light, with all the praise, with all the everybody talking about him, who does he choose as his leader? I think if I could say one thing that's going to dictate the future of Khamzat is who does he shut out and who does he trust and listen to? Because right now you're going to get all the leeches in the entire world coming to tell you why you need to coach and train with them. And who started you in this path? Was it the general? I want to keep you in that question, Khamzat, because you got to stick with the people who started you. Those are your leaders. And if the leeches pull you away from your leadership, what do we have?
Well, would you like to see him fight Colby next, or who would you like to see him fight next?
Find his leadership. If he finds the right leadership, they'll make that decision for him. It's not up to me. It's not up to the UFC. It's not up to Khamzat. I don't make those decisions. My leaders do for me. So I know as a world champion, we have to take our emotions out of the decision making and have somebody there that we trust to make those decisions for us. And I'll pray that Khamzat does that for himself and his future.
Very wise words. And lastly, for all your fans who can't wait to see you get back in there, what would you like to let them know?
I've got my leader. The leaders are making the decisions. The mind is turned off. I'm in there smashing people. That's my job, and I'll be ready to smash when it's time. I'll see you guys there. Thank you for the follow.